About the theme we have today. We'll talk about terror in India. I think this is the most tortured subject internationally, and the entire world is moved by it one way or the other. And we have three persons here to talk about the theme today with me. Mushaal Mullik, who is who's married to a Kashmiri leader, Yasin Malik, who was a leader of the LLF within the Hurriyat conference in the valley. She runs a peace and culture organization. The other very important person with us present on the stage is Nitasha, Kaul. And I think both of them have actually gone to the London School of Economics, and today Ms. Kaul is teaching at the Westminster University in the UK. And the most important fact about her is that she's a Kashmiri Pandit. And you know, in some ways, both the ladies have the same kind of approach to what is happening in Kashmir. I will first ask Nitasha Kaul to talk about the theme today. Let me put you on notice about what kind of person she is. Last year, she served as one of the key witnesses at the United States House Committee on Foreign Affairs, hearing about the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir state following the revocation of the special status within India, that is in the Indian territory. I will first ask Ms. Kaul to tell us about the case that she presented. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I'm told that we have to start the discussion without Mushaal Mullik. I forgot about my friend Arif Nizami, who's probably the most respected senior journalist in Pakistan. And I fondly remember the days when he founded The Nation Daily, and I was working under him, and I wrote the first editorial. He's now taking out a magazine called Pakistan Today, so we'll have to ask him to tell us what he thinks about what is happening in Kashmir today. So back to Ms. Kaul.
Just to say something
about what is happening in Kashmir.
Right. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I did not go to the LSE. I am, although an economist by training, in my first book is called Imagining Economics. Otherwise, I've spoken at the LSE, but that's not where I did my thing. And yeah, and also this reminds me very much of the congressional hearing, because one of the first things I said to Chairperson Sherman was about my name. So yeah, it's not Miss Kaul. It's Dr. Kaul or Nitasha is perfectly fine. So anyway, now that we've sorted that out, say something about Kashmir, about terror in Kashmir. Is that what you want me to do? I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to be a native informer as much as I hesitate to be this person who is only and exclusively a Kashmiri Pandit, because I'd like to believe that it is important that we think about what's happening in Kashmir and why that's problematic, not just now, I mean, of course now, but also in the longer run of history. Not only because I say so or an individual person is suffering. I mean, the personal stories are really important, but I feel that it's equally important for us to zoom out and to look at the Kashmiris as a collective and to see why and how their situation has come to be what it is. Before I go any further, I want to also emphasize, because I'm constantly trying to not talk about the personal, and I want people to know why. I think the reason for that is, so when I say something, people say, do you know what happened to this individual who was treated like this by the militants in this year, right? And I want to say that, yes, and that is horrible. The fact that somebody, and in this case the person was referring to the killing of Sarla Bhatt, that yes, it was really horrible and it was horrific, and nobody needs to be that person who is killed in a, in a really painful way for no fault of their own in a conflict zone. But that is precisely what a conflict is, that people are killed and different people are killed. So until and unless we move beyond this intense focus on the personal tragedies of individuals who suffered horrible deaths and keep drawing politics out from it, until then, it'll just be what I call a discourse of competing victimhoods. It's this victim versus that victim. It's my suffering versus this other person's suffering. And that just never ends. So my emphasis throughout over the years has always been to emphasize, let us find ways of recognizing that personal tragedies are important, they matter, personal histories matter, but let's also try to zoom out from that and see how Kashmiris as a people, as a collective, have been victims overall of, amongst other things, competing nationalisms, and possess, a discourse of possession that the neighboring countries have subjected them to, and something that, of course, since 2014 and now ever more since 2019 has become much worse. I mean, last year in August 2019, commentators referred to what happened as a constitutional coup, and that's not too far off the mark if we look at the way in which Kashmiris and their consent was not seen as mattering at all. There's also, I may add, something very gendered about ignoring consent. I think there's when people's consent is not taken into account, you are in effect seeing them as inferior, seeing them as subjects who can be treated any which way without their consent mattering. So I think by way of general remarks, that's what I would say. You would have to ask me something more specific, or we would get into a conversation for me to, otherwise I could just go on, believe me. And I don't think they want to hear just me.
Yeah. Let's talk about how Pakistan has reacted to what is happening in India today, and especially the effect of the uprisings in the rest of India under the Special Citizenship Amendment Act, and how it has morally affected those who champion the cause of Kashmir as a subject of plebiscite. And how far have we gone on from the original point of view?
Well, Pakistan has, over the years, tried everything in Kashmir. We tried sending tribals there at the beginning.
Again, sound system, you have probably...
Just pull it closer to yourself.
We had 3 wars, if you count Kargil 4. We've tried diplomacy, we've tried bilaterals, we tried jihad in Kashmir. But perhaps India's threshold level is much larger, and I think all Pakistan can do is a very reactive policy. To give credit to Imran Khan that he, since you mentioned the Citizen Act and before that last year the clampdown, it is totally a helpless kind of a situation. For Pakistan, war is not an option. Modi is not willing to talk to Pakistan. Bilateralism is dead. Imran Khan has tried to invoke third-party mediation. Some say that President Trump offered it and that exacerbated or accelerated the Modi's move to annex Kashmir formally or constitutionally. But India has rejected multilateralism, or they say that under Shibla Accord, Pakistan, that it precludes by any mediation or multilateralism. So Pakistan's policy right now is rather of helplessness and to a certain extent to placate or to pander to the domestic public opinion. And of course, not to mention the powers that be, the establishment which is supportive for Imran Khan. Kashmir or India policy is dictated by, I think the military has the veto power over it. And this is the policy in which some people criticize that Imran Khan is not doing enough. But I don't think so that Pakistan with two nuclear powers has any other option but to do what they are doing. Another option was jihad. We tried jihad also. Since 89 when Zia started it, and now I think our hands are tied because of the FATF, and they've given us till June to be blacklisted. We were forced to arrest our own asset, Hafiz Saeed. So I don't see any, apart from the fact that Pakistan has to make the right noises, UN Security Council is not going to take this issue formally. They have taken it up informally and issuing no statement. And even if they do, there are too many veto powers. Apart from, even France is not sympathetic to our cause. United States, President Trump is about to visit India. So India with a 400 billion plus reserves and an economy which has slowed down, having its own problems, has destroyed the ethos of its secularism. It's another subject, though, that Pakistan could have portrayed its own soft image by being, by not clamping down on the media like it is doing in Pakistan, to sort of cultivate a soft image of Pakistan, that here we have a democracy, we have a civil society, there's a live and let live. But in Pakistan also, unfortunately, authoritarian tendencies have permeated this government.
Dr. Kaul, you've just heard that there is the parallel fact of forward action task force, which has punished all the non-state actors that we have been using in Kashmir. Where do you think this will lead to? India is playing a totally negative role in Kashmir. There's more army than the Muslims themselves there. There is oppression. There's totally, breakdown of communications. And Pakistan is on the defensive. The task force, which is now punishing our non-state actors, includes China, who's a major partner in the region. So what is the scenario in your mind about the future of Kashmir?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and also for your remarks. I'd like to always believe that nothing is inevitable, so one should always hold on to hope, but I do feel that the best place to have these conversations about Kashmir is maybe not so much Lahore or Jaipur or Delhi or Islamabad, but Srinagar and Muzaffarabad and all of those places. And this is essentially, in my view, the heart of the problem. That it's a very colonial style barter if countries talk over the heads of the people who are the people in whose name all of this is being carried out. So my issue, remember February 2019, when the whole aftermath of Pulwama, the surgical strikes, the Balakot strike, all of that was happening. And the planes that were being downed and the people who were dying were, 5 Kashmiris were the people there in that region, or erstwhile state, are the people who die, people who live on those border zones and who have to be facing this all the time. So I'm afraid the answer isn't simple. The future isn't simple. I would like to think that, and as you were speaking, I want to say, yes, this is partly a global problem. The fact that Trump is visiting and he may offer to mediate, I mean, what does that mean? Not very much, in my opinion, because there is a credibility issue here. These are not people who are actually even on genial terms with their own administrations. So there is a problem. I think what we are seeing happen in places like Kashmir is also partly affected by the global rise of a certain kind of right-wing nationalism, which is embodied by these leaders who I see as being, they're electorally legitimated misogynist authoritarians who are both nationalist and neoliberal, and they say that all of their critics are anti-national. And the thing with, so even the bilateral aspect doesn't work with an administration that refuses to talk. And to go back to the question here is of vested interests. As Upton Sinclair said, it's very hard to get somebody to understand something when their salary depends on their not understanding it. In this case, there is an issue of the political profit that can be made by actors who are trying to transform the state through the use of majoritarian nationalism. And Kashmir is a, sort of like the pièce de résistance. It's the main thing that works. For them to mobilize. How can that be undone? Not easily, but I think the role of narrative here is really important. So for people who are in, say, India, to understand, and I think this is where the citizenship amendment and the National Register thing links in, because to any observer, it becomes quite obvious that in the last couple of months, last 3, I wouldn't say 6, because Kashmir itself wasn't given that much attention. But once all of this is starting to happen more and more in India, and there is a resistance against all of that, against these amendments and against the, what people see as constitutional vandalism, that is also making people more aware of what is happening in Kashmir in their name. So I think there is a tenuous amount of, some tenuous reasons to hope there, because it's not obvious, but that, that people are going to be able to make that next step. But at least people are now more able to recognize what has been happening, what happens when you have legally sanctioned impunity, what happens when you have massive amounts of militarization. So I think the question that you asked me was, what do you see as the way ahead? I think partly that is also to do with transforming, making the case for a people-centered approach to looking at this not just as an IR dispute between these two nation states, but as something that needs to start from the Kashmiris themselves. And in that, the international, the role of the international community, is important. Yes, we have very problematic actors right now. Yes, there is there is an issue with reform of organizations, international organizations themselves, including the UN, but still there is some good work. There was the report that was produced by the OHCHR, which was a step forward. So we should also look at these little moves forward that are creating an archive which is going to be useful once we have, hopefully, better people in place who have some credibility to be able to move ahead.
Arif, Nizami, you must have noticed that the entire world is offended with India because of the violation of human rights. We actually tried to also highlight our rights in Kashmir, and the world has ignored it. Why is the world ignoring our approach to the Kashmir problem? For instance, we wanted to go to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and we couldn't hold a session on Kashmir there. As a result, the Islamic world is now split, and there are new dangers because we have joined up with a group which is not very friendly with our traditional friends in the Gulf, and we have a lot of stake in the Gulf. What will happen? Will the focus from Kashmir then shift because of this split?
It's a conundrum. I mean, Pakistan, the catch-22 is that the Islamic countries which have openly supported the Kashmir cause are only Malaysia and Turkey. But we are very closely tied to the Saudi largest because of our financial issues. And there is a long-standing security arrangement with them. So the Saudis control the OIC, and OIC is just a club which cannot even play an effective role for the Palestinian cause. And Kashmir is something very distant for them. And the Gulf countries' ties with India, economic ties, there are a large number of expats. They've got big investments in India. Saudis have signed big deals, Aramco. So, I mean, I think it's money talks and BS walks in this case. And India is a large market. Now Trump is coming there, he'll sell them some more goodies. And I don't know why Pakistan is expecting that the Foreign Office said yesterday that Trump will hopefully play a mediatory role. I think that is not going to happen. India has, as you said correctly, that gross human rights violation in India are taking place. And why is the world not taking notice of it? Because what is the world itself? China, our traditional friend, I once attended the Human Rights Commission session in Geneva, and China has its own human rights problems, whether it is Tibet or it's the Uyghur Muslims, which we are loath to talk about. So how can they play a pivotal role in, if you take the human rights angle? The self-determination issue, of course, some countries will support us, but gone are the days when the countries were liberated on the basis of self-liberation. This is a kind of an end of history kind of a situation, where it is a genuine case of self-determination, and you can no longer, I think what has been clarified by this this Modi's clampdown is that despite saying that it's a function of terrorism, cross-terrorism, what they call Ghuspettiyas from Pakistan, Kashmir is an indigenous problem. And in fact, sometimes I feel that the Kashmiri youth, their courage and their sacrifices also have forced Pakistan and other countries to take notice of it. I wouldn't say that we are paying lip service, but as I said earlier, on the basis of human rights, our own record is not that salutary. The way we treat our own minorities, the manner in which I earlier mentioned forced disappearances, and there are scores of other, which is not our subject really, but our own, I mean, it's very difficult to stand on that. Although right now India's moral high ground is completely eroded, more so because of the Citizen Act, apart from the Kashmir. Muslims are disenfranchised. But even then, we must appreciate that the civil society in India is in, if not in revolt, they are protesting. JNU University, BJP thugs beat up, and they are not Muslims, all of them. They are the civil society of India, which is more, I would say, vibrant than in our own country. And because of that, these issues, like Pakistan has to do a lot to even portray a soft image of itself and win more friends. And basically, Pakistan's problem is, one is I think, its economic, shrinking economic base, its obsession with militarizing, the imprint of how should I put it, the establishment in running civilian affairs, So, where is the moral high ground?
Dr. Kaul, thank you. Dr. Kaul, I would like your opinion on the landscape now, that Pakistan has not been able to actually rouse the world to its own attitude or the United Nations Security Council resolutions. On the other hand, Pakistan's economic situation is not comparable to what India has. There are many secular Indians who are writing very well about the negative side of the Narendra Modi government. But as you mentioned in one of your articles, the corporate India is absolutely behind Modi. There may be an economic dip in the current situation, but India's economic authority in the region is more or less established. So how can you persuade the world to be fair in the case of the Kashmiris' persecution?
Thank you. Yes, that's, we know what the problem is. The facts are all there. But I have a few points to say. Thank you for asking me that. Imagine an experiment where you have, you create like lots of little different sized boxes. And you say, okay, these are different sized, but they're actually all having equal worth. And then in each of those boxes, and they're all run by the same system, which is going to be a system where money is going to be movable across all of these boxes. But the people who are inside each box can only seemingly care about what's inside their box. That's the world we live in right now, right? Transnational flows of capital are what run not just economies, but also politics. And that clearly and very obviously simply means that the interests of capital in each of these countries are fairly aligned. And people know that, which is why you have these people meet each other, which is why Bolsonaro and Trump and Modi and all of these people, they're friends, because these are the interests that run the world. On the matter of political human rights concerns and people's rights, that is always a struggle, I think, of the powerless against the powerful, here using a dominant idea of power, because everyone, as a state, every state is interested in human rights violations that happen somewhere else, right? Because there is an interest to be served by them. So following on from what has just been said, the economic interests are predominant, which is why the idea that there is some kind of an Islamic countries are going to somehow care about Kashmir, it does not hold up to scrutiny for two reasons. One, because the whole idea of looking at this kind of civilizational blocks in the Huntington sense, that the world is divided into these civilizations, is problematic because there is diversity everywhere, including within religions. And secondly, because the economic interests predominate, which is why Modi has his friends, including in the part of the world that we know as West Asia or the Middle East. So there is a selectivity and a hypocrisy in how these issues are pursued. And also, I think that we are waking up to the brief kind of period of a dream of multipolarity after the end of Cold War. That's not really holding up, and we are in a state of flux. And another larger question, I think, is, and when looking at Kashmir and why it's so hard to move ahead, is what is actually going to be the form that 21st century anti-colonial struggles are going to take. We don't yet know that, because we know that in the 20th century, there was this wave of decolonizations that happened as a result of anti-colonial struggles. But nearly less than almost 100 years on, we don't really know how these struggles are going to pan out, whether that is in Catalonia, whether that is in Scotland or other places. We don't yet know. Nowhere are states able to realize that this kind of, people's realization of their political rights, self-determination as it were, that by calling it secessionism and by going on suppressing people, it does not serve their own interests either. It's true in every case, but it seems to be unrealized in any case. And I think the hope for that can only come from the ground up, from people's resistance themselves. And that resistance does not necessarily have to be armed or a militant kind of resistance, because the withdrawing consent from the system through various kinds of civil disobedience is also an equally effective tool, or just changing the narrative, as we have seen in the case of Scotland. So I think that minoritarian nationalisms, as opposed to majoritarian ones, if they have a, if they pursue a coherent enough narrative which keeps placing their struggles at the heart, then I think that going forward we might be able to create some sort of a way ahead. And I think in that story, Kashmir is one of these many struggles that we are globally being faced with.
Thank you. The next question is to Mr. Nizami. We are now faced with a situation in which Pakistan is in deep economic trouble. And we see that the international support on the issue of Kashmir is also meaningfully not in favor of Pakistan, although most of us tend to join up with the anger, international anger on the violation of human rights in India. But I think we have to consider the fact that in the final analysis, our case on Kashmir is not going to find favor. So what should the establishment now be thinking, since it's the establishment which runs Kashmir policy? In what way can we join the world and persuade India to take the kind of action which Dr. Kaul would support? Because I believe that Mr. Modi has won 2 elections, the third election also he will win. If you look at the Indian press, the English language press tends to criticize. There are a lot of very wonderful writers who criticize Mr. Modi on what he's doing in Kashmir. But like the United States, it hardly matters. Everybody in the press in the United States is against Mr. Trump, but he's going to trounce the opposition again and win the second time. So what kind of stance should our establishment try to take? Because I think after all, at some point, the changes within the establishment, the change of mind has to happen.
Of course, what you mentioned the media, ironically speaking, that today I was trying to access the Indian Express website. So I realized that it is blocked.
It's blocked.
I mean, this is the mindset of our establishment.
Yeah, Mike.
That these are the papers. Somebody sent me a critical article on Kashmir, but I couldn't read it. So, I mean, this kind of mindset, which is kind of a closed kind of a mindset. I was just reading somewhere that in Kashmir there is a hotel, luxury hotel called Centaur on the Dal Lake.
There is a what, sorry? There is a what, sorry? Ah, okay.
And all the pro-New Delhi, erstwhile pro-Delhi politicians like Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti and others are there. Some have been released, but these are under a law which they can put them behind bars. Somehow this has become the new narrative or the new normal after the Saudis put so many of their people in a hotel. The Indian establishment is ruined too. And this is somehow the ideal of Mr. Khan as well, that we should have a hotel where we could put in all the corrupt people and all that. So that is only a sidelight, but coming to your question that what should the establishment do? I think the establishment over the years has changed a bit, but not enough. I mean, one thing is for sure, that despite all the saber rattling, I think Pakistani establishment knows that war is not an option. They also know that Pakistan's economic base is not big enough or strong enough to support another confrontation, a military confrontation with India. Even sometimes it seems, I don't know whether Modi or his predecessors have so much sense, or the Indian establishment, but the net effect is that like the former Soviet Union was being bled by the United States, in the same way, we are bleeding because of our weak economic base, and the candle is burning on both sides. One, we want to maintain a conventional force of rop, and on the other, we are also excelling in missile technology. So, of course, one can argue that had it not been the nuclear bomb, we could have gone to another war with India. That is true, that would be a kind of a disaster. But there are people in Pakistan who say that if you have an atomic bomb, use it. Without realizing the consequences, my late uncle, Mr. Nizami, used to say that tie me to a bomb and send me to India. So, I mean, we had that kind of Dr. Strangeloves here. But the Pakistani establishment, no matter, I like to translate it, no matter how much things change, they remain the same. The security paradigm, the security depth on one side has also been tempered with the situation in Afghanistan, but still it's the same mindset that we have strategic depth there, we have confrontation with India there, and we also realize we no longer have the base. And if a civilian politician reaches us to India, I think Nawaz Sharif was made a horrible example. I mean, I'm no sympathizer of Nawaz Sharif, but he was naive. He went to India on Modi's inauguration thinking that Modi is another Bajpayee, which he is not. But because of that, he was accused of promoting his business interests. Like in our lexicon, in a feudal milieu, the enemies are forgiven, not renegades. And Nawaz Sharif is considered a renegade, a product of the establishment, who went to India and later on kept on harping upon a better relationship with India. The result is that we are all familiar with the Nara, Modi ka jo yaar hai, wo gaddar hai. So, I mean, with this kind of mindset and a very, very strong propaganda machinery, the army's own propaganda machinery is much stronger than the civilian. One is, like, as a media person, in my newspaper, I am rather confused. Who's calling the shots? So, I mean, unless another disaster is waiting to happen, Pakistan has no option but to use the diplomatic card. Unfortunately, I did not mention the another thing which has been used by different governments, even during Musharraf's government, as Mr. Khurshid Kusuri, our former foreign minister, has written very extensively on it, although he was not a part of it. The back channel diplomacy, the secret diplomacy, perhaps the kind of solution which Musharraf had virtually reached at that time is the answer. Because war is an option, India is not to give away Kashmir. Pakistan can't snatch it. It doesn't have the capacity or the tenacity or the capability to do that. So, I mean, ultimately we have to go back to the conference table whenever Modi is in a mood or whoever is there. And Pakistan is, I think, willing to talk. But after raising the hand so much on the propaganda side, how will both the countries sell such kind of a deal to their people is another conundrum.
Thank you. Somebody who's sitting in Rawalpindi and has switched off Indian Express should realize that Indian Express has emerged as the most anti-Modi government paper in India. If actually we are looking for a good voice in India, it is newspapers like the Indian Express. I myself write a column in it, but you can't access Indian Express in Pakistan. So somebody should go to Rawalpindi and talk to the guy who switched it off to persuade him that it is in Pakistan's own interest to let this newspaper fly. Dr. Kaul, how do you see the future scenario with Modi firmly entrenched, and most probably he'll win the third time also? India will get out of the economic trough that it is in. The world will probably, ask him to go slow on the violation of human rights. If he corrects himself, then what will happen to the Kashmir cause?
Nothing. I'll repeat with the thing that I said before. Nothing is inevitable. So we don't know whether any or all of that is going to happen. Some of which hopefully will not. But I want to say. So since when? Sorry, just to go back a bit. Since when has Indian Express been banned here?
It has been switched off now. I think I started. Yeah, Hindu is also. I started writing 10 years ago, and it was switched off then.
Right, okay. So this is not a recent thing.
Times of India also.
I see.
It's not.
This switch thing to control information is really interesting. No, the reason I asked about Indian Express is because maybe less than a week ago on my Facebook, I saw people arguing about the fact that there was an article recently published in the Indian Express, which was, I haven't read the article, but one of the people there who was posting it said that this article is hagiographic about Golwalkar, who was one of the RSS founders. And some of the other people who were objecting to it, to the critique of the fact that Indian Express published this article, were saying, well, we've got to know why this is important. And then, of course, it went back to looking at whether you should, what does freedom of speech mean? Does that mean you can talk about very problematic figures who were, and in this case, clearly somebody who looked up to the idea of a pure nation and had no qualms about it without mentioning all of that. So I thought this was recent, but it seems like it's been on for a while. Okay. Again, to draw from your conversation so far, I would like us to acknowledge, even if we can't address, the way in which these euphemisms, these, strategic depths and quadrilaterals and triangles of security that we're talking about forever as analysts do not address the very fundamental fact that security is a human security thing. It is not naive, it is not emotional to say that you cannot actually have a political solution unless the living, breathing, working, moving bodies who are part of that conflict are somehow on board. So you can have, name it, pick that person, whoever you want that to be, Khan, Trump, Modi, whoever, bring any figure, and from whichever box you like, put whatever flags you want behind it. But people have this very mulish human beings, ordinary human beings have a very mulish tendency that, to recognize what they want and what they need and what they're not happy with. And masses of people will, time and again, in different parts of the world, let their governments or their oppressors know, this isn't it, I'm not going to put up with it. And that's what also the Kashmiris are and have been doing. So fundamentally, it does come back to that question of looking at these things, of changing the discourse from, from what these individual actors can achieve. Sure, diplomacy is much better than all of the other stuff. And certainly wars will not solve any problems because, as I said, they'll be conducted in a very colonial style over the heads of these people. And also, the other thing I do want us to acknowledge is how what India has been doing recently goes against any normal understanding of self-interest. If you look at it from the point of a very narrow point of view too, because by putting its own, in effect, people who were their collaborators, people who were their political, in coalition with, and in the past, by putting these mainstream, as the media calls them, mainstream politicians, by booking them under PSA, by putting the former bureaucrat, Shah Faisal, under what you're trying to do is essentially, create this kind of either with us or against us rhetoric. But not really, because you're also trying to buy people, because you need the next level of collaborators as everywhere. So I want to also say that this is, it just lays bare. There's no pretense of any kind of any goodwill anymore. And it's just become very obvious for what it is. And that neither the hearts nor the minds of the Kashmiris themselves can in any way be won with this. And also you said in the future that they will win elections. I don't know what that really means. I think we're going to play less and less. We're going to lay less and less store by what does it mean to win elections, because I think elections are becoming ever more, we were discussing this recently in Berlin at an academic symposium, elections are becoming more and more this way of actually destroying democracy. That, you have these elections, but substantively they're not democratic. I mean, even with the elections last year, there are all sorts of questions around, the way in which complaints were settled around the use of electoral bonds, and then there's courts, and then there's a whole different story as to how then courts choose to respond or to just stay quiet over addressing all of this. So I don't know whether I hope there will be the next elections, but some people have said that that's, who am I thinking of? There was this one leader, Sakshi Maharaj, who said that if we win, there won't be the next election. So I'm not saying it, he said it. I hope there will be elections. I hope that people will continue to hold courts and constitutional bodies to power, and that, including on cases relating to funding, such as the electoral bond issue. What else did you ask me? You said that, but last year when the Indian elections were going on, the Prime Minister here, Imran Khan, had said that he supported Modi coming to power. It's something that I've always been very perplexed by. Sometimes, I mean, we just don't know what's good for us, I think, as individuals or as... like I was talking about the Indian case, I mean, they seem to also be very fallible people who are making these calculations that are wrong. So ultimately, I have more faith in masses of people who are actually living under these regimes of power and impunity than I have in leaders who are ostensibly going to solve it all for us. I think that's really it.
Well, what happened was that when Imran Khan came to power, his opinion was that we should normalize relations with India. And since Modi is a powerful person, his party is dominant in India, we will probably discuss Kashmir and come to some kind of conclusion. The other thing which happened was that we had an army chief who thought that more than the eastern border, the western border was dangerous. And he started wire fencing it, because very clearly India had established a strategic depth in Afghanistan, especially with the government which has now won the elections again. So is it possible for Pakistan to ignore public opinion, which has now swung completely anti-Indian because of what is happening inside India, for somebody like Imran Khan and the establishment to ignore the popular anger and start negotiating or offer to negotiate with Modi? Let me remind you that India had a similar conflict with China. It still has that difference of opinion on the northern borders brewing. But China is the largest trading partner of India. So there is a kind of normalization which is taking place at the same time. Somehow we have not been able to do it because of, as you mentioned, because of the establishment. Is it time for us to actually change despite the public opinion and seek normalization with India again?
Mr. Khaled, sorry to interrupt. Can I just respond to that answer that you gave me just very briefly? Sure. You can not ask me the next one. Sorry, yeah? Sure. Can I just... So, when you said that he said it because he thought that this was a strong person who will come to power, and that's precisely my point. We're just thinking that these strong people will make things better, and they end up making things worse for everyone. It's not just him. I've heard people in Kashmiris say that. If the BJP comes to power, everything, they will be able to do this. Some people did say that. I mean, of course, ago, not now. So this faith that we have is that, you have the bully come in power, and the bully is going to be able to sort everything out. It just ends up, the bully doesn't change when the bully gets to power. The bully just stays the bully, and then has wonderful meetings with other bullies, and they form a gang of bullies, and then we have a bigger struggle. So let's just recognize the little bully and not make them just get much worse. And likewise with your army chiefs and in the Indian case as well, this idea of...
That's a bleak message for us, because in Pakistan also, just like Modi's India, the opposition has more or less disappeared. We see the same kind of thing in America, where the opposition, especially the Democrats, are faded for a long time ahead. If you go to Turkey, you see the same kind of thing about the person who is now treating women not very nicely there.
Because we live in a time of, one sentence, sorry, we live in a time of a global league of electorally legitimated, not democratic, electorally legitimated, ruling misogynist authoritarians who claim a monopoly on nationalism and therefore call others anti-national, come to power claiming to challenge capitalism while benefiting from crony capitalism. So far, no case defies this. All cases fit. I'm so very sorry. I cede all of the rest of my time to you.
Mr. Nizami, what do you think about the change of heart inside the establishment? They have seen, I think, since they are dominant, they know the various points of view. Will they behave differently towards a government which is going to take a new stance on Kashmir and start thinking of actually normalizing with India and then allow the Kashmir question to settle itself gradually?
First of all, I want to mention China. I've been to China with different prime ministers, and every time, the Chinese have implored us to talk to India about Kashmir. You mentioned China has a policy of economic diplomacy, like they have, and they want Pakistan to do the same. But unfortunately, public opinion is the official certified truth here. Hysteria is created. So, I mean, if Pakistan takes its friends along and talk to India, I think establishment might relent in the sense of talking to India. But it has to be initiated through the establishment in Pakistan to succeed. That is the unfortunate reality of our democracy. Otherwise, the cat paws of the establishment in the media, which are many, will end on, and now the powerful electronic media will create such a ethos, and with courts sometime compliant, we might end up with another Dawn leak and another change.
I think we should move to the questions before we close.
Thank you very much. I'm Victoria Schofield. I want to pick up on a point that, Nitasha, you've made when we were talking about looking at suffering of one individual, another individual, and then the conflict. And until the conflict is resolved, we are going to continue to having suffering on all sides. And I think one of the problems with the Kashmir is that we do use the shorthand Kashmir, but it is a complicated issue. As we know, the reason why Pakistan is involved is because Pakistan is controlling 1/3 of the state, India is controlling 2/3 of the state. And I think the shorthand narrative is what really also trips us up, because we have to look, if we're looking for resolution of a conflict, we have to look at the entire Jammu and Kashmir dispute effectively, which includes other stakeholders in Ladakh, in Jammu, in the Valley of Kashmir, in Gilgit-Baltistan, in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. So I wondered if you could elaborate on that in the context of where next in terms of resolving this conflict, because we're never going to resolve it, the human rights abuses, until we resolve the conflict. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Victoria. That's really it. The fact that you can't just address the human rights abuses because the human rights abuses are occurring for a reason. And the reason that, so there is a connection between the political dispute, the political problem, and the human rights abuses, because it is a territorial obsession, and where sovereignty cannot be exercised without the use of that kind of force in that context. But at the same time, because it just kind of, there are various prismatic levels of how there's involvement, kind of history, the old imperial history, then post-colonial imperial history, then the regional splits, then all of the legal stuff. So it all just adds up to a very complex mosaic. So yes, in an ideal sense, of course, that's what I've always sought to argue, that we need to have an international understanding of why the current state of affairs is problematic for all of the people in the different territories. Of course, for some, it is a life and death matter, but there is economic suffering, there's lack of connectivity, there's all sorts of deprivations that happen in these different regions. And the solution can only come from those conversations within those regions, which I think neither of the two countries, which are ostensibly the bilateral partners, would be happy with. So that's the move that we need to make, to be able to see how these territories, how they move forward. I mean, if I think of the Balkans in Europe, that's, it's not, for me, that's, you just see the way in which ethnic, national, regional divides kind of, that it is possible to move forward in some measure, but it's always going to be something that we'll have to keep struggling and arguing for. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have the mic. My question is for Nitasha. Is it possible in the given situation to redraw the geographical boundaries of a country when we have literally failed in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan? What do you think?
See, that's what I was trying to say earlier. Firstly, is it possible to redraw? Yes, of course. Say tomorrow, if India and Pakistan say, let's make line of control the de facto border, right? They can. I mean, and if they did, would that make Kashmiris happy? I don't think so. So it's possible to redraw lines in better or worse ways. That's the first thing I would say. And secondly, I'd say that the point that I was trying to make earlier, the 21st century decolonizations can and will need to take place eventually as we go along, as they did in 20th century. I mean, the longer zoom of history is always very useful, because what seems to us very entrenched and inevitable is never the case if you look at that over a 500-year period or a 200-year period. So, I mean, no empires thought that they would ever have to cede territories. So lines move. In fact, there are maps, fast time-lapse maps, where you can see the boundaries of nations move, and they do move over time. So it just seems it's totally counterintuitive to any understanding of humanity and common sense to let Kashmiris go on suffering just for the sake of these lines that, that are affecting millions of people and not just Kashmiris themselves. It's hard, but it's not impossible. And I think, as I'll go back again to that thing of nothing being inevitable, 21st century decolonizations, these struggles of various nations around the world are going to find a way to make themselves heard.
Hi, Nitasha. So this goes back to your point when you're talking about why we're having this discussion in Lahore and not Srinagar or Muzaffarabad, because I thought that was very important. I think it's policy 101 to know that you can't really define what the solution is for an affected population, but give them enough agency to define that themselves. And I think the Pakistani narrative these days when talking about Kashmir is, whether we like it or not, is dominated by, it's a Muslim majority state and they were meant to be Pakistan in the first place and they'd be happier on this side of the border. But how can we really, being a state that maybe not as extreme as what India is going through right now, but we're quite policed and we are emulating a lot of their problematic policies, and our minorities are not doing very well. So how can we say that even if Kashmir is liberated from India, that Pakistan won't try to impose its supremacy over that area as well? And it won't be another series of problems, and even if it doesn't, then Kashmir is really sandwiched between two very problematic states. So is there any right solution for the Kashmiri people? They're the only victims in this situation.
Thank you. So there is the appeal of ethno-nationalist, majoritarian religious states. That's we're seeing that there's not just one. There's many that are or want to be such states. So that is a problem. I think because of the way in which it does not sit with what we have inherited from this whole kind of liberal, secular, democratic world order, post-Cold War world order that we were supposed to have. How can they survive? I'm actually quite sanguine about it. I don't think that is a problem. I think small states can and do survive between larger ones. I think that they don't always have to be buffer states. Yes, they have their particular diplomatic strategies that they often adopt, but it's not impossible. There are many cases, and in fact what heartens me is that within IR now we more and more talk about small states. And we talk about the way in which small states may actually, there are people who write about the ways in which small states don't just have to take norms because they might have different strengths. They might find ways of creating norms that big states may not be able to do so. So I think that part of this is also shifting the discourse to looking at small states and the viability of small states and how successful small states have functioned. So I think that it's entirely possible because it's actually in the economic interests to negotiate, even if it is water, all of those sorts of things. It's more commonsensical actually for Indians and Pakistanis to actually move towards understanding the political aspiration of Kashmiris and letting them realize that.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we come to the conclusion of this discussion. Thank you very much.